So, good morning everybody, and today we're going to go and do that site survey I mentioned in the last video, which I'll put the link up on here, that I did on pen fault detection devices. Now, couldn't do the site survey that I spoke about in the last video. It started pouring up with rain, so not only was it cold, it's raining as well. So we're sort of the day after. It's a little bit warmer today, hence no jumper. Right, so we're going to go and do this site survey, and I think the best way to describe what needs to be done in a site survey is to actually go to the house and show you the methodology behind doing it. And once that site survey is done, if it all passes that site survey, and for right now I don't know whether it will or not, and then hopefully we'll go ahead with doing the charging. Now, I do know the estate I'm going to. I've done work in those houses before, so they're about 30 years old, so they're not ancient buildings, and they're all detached, so that should help things a little bit. But obviously I won't know until I get there and start doing the survey. So let's go over to that property and let's get going on it. Okay, so we're here on site, so I'm just going to take you through the survey that I've had to do before we go any further with doing this installation for this charger. Okay, so first thing we need to check is we need to check the incoming fuse to see what we've got. Now on this we've got a 100 amp incoming fuse, so that's absolutely fine. We're also not on a looped supply.
So a loop supply is exactly what it sounds like. You've got the cable coming into your property and it's looped to every property next door. Now you are not allowed to put an EV charger point on a looped supply. You're just not. So if you were to see a loop supply, that's where this site survey would end, because there's no point going any further. You're just not allowed to do it. It's a simple reason why is you've got one cable coming into your property which is then fed to every other property. So if you put an EV charger on your property, very likely if you went over the current limit of the fuse, you could blow the whole street out. So that's why you're not allowed to do it. Now the only way to go from there is you'd have to go to the DNO and you'd have to be taken off the loop supplies. You'd have to have a dedicated cable coming in, and obviously that would affect every other house in the street, because somewhere someone's got to be reconnected back to the cable in order to re-establish the loop supply. But it's one of the few things on the site survey that you'd see right at the start, and it would stop the site survey dead right there.
But we've got a single supply coming in. We can see that it's a TNCS supply as well, so we do need to make sure that we're dealing with pen fault detection on the charger, which we know the charger that we're putting in does indeed have. So that's where we are with those, so we're quite happy with that. Let's go to the board itself. Now obviously it's an older board, it's plastic, but we have a 100 amp main switch, we have a 100 amp RCD, and these are not RCD protected, but as you can probably tell, most of these apart from one is lights, so you don't need to be RCD protecting those. And on this side we've got a 40, which is for the shower, and then we've got a line of 32s, and one of those is for the cooker and the rest are sockets and things, so we can work with that. The good thing about this is, if I don't know if I can zoom in a bit, but there you go. So we've got an AC waveform and a DC waveform which identifies this RCD as a type A, which is perfectly fine for the EV charger, because the EV charger that we're putting in doesn't have an RCD, so we're going to have the RCD upstream, so we're going to be using this to do it. So after all that, we can use this board. It's an old board, but it's not against regs, so we can leave the board alone. We've got two spare ways, one there, but we're going to use that one and make use of this RCD. Now the instructions on the EV chargers mandated that this has to be a 40 amp MCB, which we've managed to get hold of for this old board, no problem at all. And then what we're going to do is, I'm not sure whether we're going to come out the side or the top of the board and run a 6mm. We could run 4, but I'm going to run with 6. We're going to run a 6mm Doncaster EV Ultra cable from here, and the thing is actually going, hang on a second, is, I don't know if you can see the sun, but it's actually going here or here. We're not talking with the client, we're not sure which side we're going to do. The only wrinkle is we're planning on coming through there and there, and we're just hoping that what is in here, there's not a metal RSJ in here. So I'm going to drill a pilot hole and find out if there is or not. Hopefully there isn't. If so, we're going straight through there, straight out to the wall outside. Right, so the next thing I have to do is I have to inform the DNO that we're putting a EV charger in. In the electric vehicle charging equipment installation book, on page 90 of the 4th edition of the electric vehicle charging equipment installation book, we have, hang on, there we go. I'll see if I can bring that up better in the office later maybe, but that's what I have to do to tell the DNO, and we'll go through that in a bit. In the 5th edition, which I'm just waiting to get a delivery of, I'm not sure if it's on page 90 or not, but it might be. Now, what we have to do to tell the DNO is I have to do a maximum demand calculation on everything that's in this board behind me. Now, I've managed to find out we've got an electric shower in here, and we've got a cooker, and we've got a induction hob, and I've got all the values for those for kilowatt ratings. That's all done. I am just doing identifying all the different circuits because the labelling we've discovered isn't right. So we're just going through all these circuits, and also to give me a more accurate maximum demand, because none of this is right, and the maximum demand I came up with was over 100 amps, which the DNO would not have been happy with. So this N1 we believe is the downstairs sockets, and also the boiler is attached to that on a spur. This water heater we feel isn't doing anything at all. It's not connected, it's not in use, so we can discount that one altogether. The shower is definitely on the shower, we know that. Then these three we're still trying to identify. Okay, so we've got this one is the cooker, and it's been mislabeled, so we know that's the cooker. So we're going to go to the next one. We're going to turn on the next one. Okay, so that one, that's turned on the downstairs socket. Right. So that's the rest of the downstairs sockets have come on. Yeah. Do you know if they've come on upstairs as well? Because that would mean your kitchen is like ours. The kitchen's on a separate circuit to everything else. Right. That's what that means. It's all good fun. Right. So this one has brought on the rest of the house sockets. So this one seems to be the kitchen sockets and the boiler. This one appears to be the cooker. This one appears to be the rest of the sockets, possibly in the rest of the house, but we'll check that just a second. Right, I think. So we now know, roughly speaking, sockets for the house except the kitchen, cooker, kitchen's sockets, and this one we think is the hob now. So the hob should come on, hopefully. Yeah. Right. Okay. Good. God dear.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to do the maximum demand calculations. So as you can see, these are the circuits we identified in the consume unit, numbers 1 through 11. Number 12 is going to be the EV charger point. So what we identified were we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lighting circuits and a water heater. Let's deal with those first. Well, as we found out, the water heater is no longer in use. There's going to be no current draw through there whatsoever, so we can easily take that down as 0%. Now, I went round the whole house and I counted up the number of luminaires, or light fittings, and we came up with 48 lights. Now, under the new regulations, under Amendment 2, it's been reduced from 100 watts down to 30 watts per illuminaire. So that's going to come out at a grand total of just 6 amps. So we ignore all of these individual circuits that have got 6 amps each. We're just going to work with 6 amps. So we'll come down to the other side, on the other side of the RCD. There's no diversity on the shower, that has to be 40 amps. As you can see though, we are running with a 9.5 amp shower that I've discovered, which would be drawing 41 amps. So we're going to have to look at that at a later date, because that's obviously got the wrong MCB in place. But I don't want to muck about with that until I can double check all the cabling and stuff. There might be something more going on here than just changing the circuit breaker. So let's forget about that just for a minute. The cooker was on a 32 amp circuit breaker. The hob was in its own 32 amp circuit breaker, as we discovered, and then we have two 32 amp sockets, one of which is for the kitchen and also feeds the boiler, and the others for the rest of the house. That was nice and simple. So the cooker was drawing 4.12 kilowatts, the hob 2.4 kilowatts. So running the diversity calculations through all of that, I won't go through all the details, but you know it's first 10 amps plus 30% of the remainder for a cooker and a hob. It's the same thing. So they came out as 12 and 10. You can have 66% of the total load for the lights, so 6 amps total came out as 4. So what we are allowed to do these days is we are allowed to do a very simple maximum demand calculation, which is this one here. We can take 100% of the largest loaded circuit, no, I said loaded circuit, plus 40% of the remaining loads. Very important to distinguish between the value on the circuit breaker and the load associated with the circuit, because they will be different. So in this particular case, the shower is going to be the largest circuit. It isn't going to be the EV charger, it's the shower. Now at the moment we're going to have to use 41. Now the cooker, the load that we calculated for the cooker is actually 12.4 amps, but we're just going to use 12. And because of what we're doing here, we're allowed to reduce that by 40%. Now I've got a funny feeling there's going to be a lot of people saying no, you can't do that. There's a lot of how can I put this, discussion, shall we say, about this particular calculation. But if you look at things like the EFIX channel and some of the other electrical channels, this is how it is done. I'm just going with the flow. So down to the hob, the diversity calculation, that as 10 amps, we can take 40% of that to bring it down to 4. The lights, 60% of that load is 4, we can bring that down to 1.6. And the sockets, total amount of amps on the sockets, then you have to take the values for the sockets. So that's 64, 40% of that is 25.6. That gives an estimated demand for this particular property of 77 amps. Now you look at that and you think there is no way that house is taking 77 amps as a maximum demand, and it probably isn't. Unfortunately, maximum demand is best guess, so my best guess on this is 77. Now the good news for that is, yes, we're putting in a 40 amp MCB for the EV charging point, but we are only going to be using 32 amps of that. Now the reason for that is that this particular circuit is going to be on for long periods of time, which will heat up that circuit breaker, and it could be a cause of nuisance tripping. So although it's at 40 amps, the instructions stipulated 40 amps, they also stipulate that when you commission it, only set it to 32, 8 amps less. That's fine, we're still using 32 amps out to the car, that's absolutely fine. So realistically, we could plug in the 32 amps down here, take 40% of it, and we'll come out at around 88. So in this particular case, I would send off to the DNO that particular figure there, and also the expected demand when the EV charger is put in, both of which are going to come below the 100 amps. They ought to be happy with that. There currently in the regulations is not another way of doing this. The only way of doing this would be to put on a demand monitor on the incoming line and measure the current over a couple of weeks and then see if you can get it right there. But even then, that's still best guess, because you're taking an arbitrary couple of weeks window within a year, and we all know that in the winter you're going to take more power than the summer, and certainly you are at Christmas. So you're never going to get an accurate result. You can only get as close as you can. So that's where we are with this. You can see that the biggest problem in a house is actually the shower, even though it could only maybe on for like 15-20 minutes at a time.
Okay, so doing the maximum demand by checking all the circuits manually has brought us out with a much more reasonable figure than when I was doing it by the theory. So we're coming out around the 76 amps, so we should be absolutely fine. Obviously we're putting on a 40 amp breaker, but the charger is only going to draw 32. Now I know that comes out to 108, but this has a current limiting device on it, so it's not going to go over the limit. So we'll go back to the office, make all these calculations, get the form filled in and get it sent off to the DNO, and then we're going to start work on this property on Monday, a couple of days after the week. Just go through the weekend and then we'll start on Monday.